So I want to tell you a story about a neighbor of mine when I was living in the mobile home park here in El Cajon. And last year, Jim, who's in his 80s, called his son in New York about a year ago this time. And he says, I hate to tell you this, but we got some troubles here in the house. Your mom and I can't stand each other anymore, and we're getting a divorce. I've had it. I want to live out the rest of my years in peace. I'm telling you this so you and your sister aren't surprised when I move out. Well, he hangs up, and his son immediately calls the sister and tells her the news, and she says, they can't divorce. They can't do this. I'll handle this. So she calls Jim, and she says, don't do anything until we get there. We'll be there on Wednesday. Jim says, okay. So the old man hangs up, and he says, they'll be here for Thanksgiving dinner. And they're buying their own ticket. So I want to thank Jody for singing that wonderful song from Ecclesiastes 3, because it saved me from having to read it, and it saved you from having to sleep through it. And it's really one of my favorite passages in the Bible. And it's widely used and can be used as a wisdom teaching through a lot of different indigenous cultures and other faith traditions. And it speaks to the common thread of our human experience. Our earthly journeys provide seasons that meld one into the other. A barren winter turns into a new birth called spring, which matures and grows into the fullness of summer, and so on. And sometimes we take comfort in this predictability. The seasons change, and when times are good, we think we want this to last forever. But what happens when our winter of depression turns into our spring of depression and our summer of depression? And what happens when the summer of anger just rages on? And what happens when the season, the autumn of grief, becomes the winter of grief and the spring of grief and continues on for years? What happens when these things happen? When the seasons of pain don't change. Now, at most times at this point, the simple words, this too shall pass, seems far too simple of an explanation. But let's look at these long seasons. First, I want to ask you, would you complain about a long season of a nurturing relationship? No. You might actually forget you have one. You might actually forget to be thankful for it, but you wouldn't complain about it. Or a long season when it rains prosperity. Would you complain about that? No. But when life appears unpleasant, most concepts of time are just thrown out the window. Life hurts, and we want it to stop now. Sometimes, when we're in the midst of a long season of grief or pain, we forget to notice the equally long seasons of kindness and love and support that others are giving us. We forget to be grateful. You know, I know it's a challenge to be grateful in the midst of a toothache. And I use a toothache as a metaphor for those really strong pains that you can't ignore. But that doesn't discount that we are surrounded by love and have opportunities to do so ourselves. And sometimes the long seasons of pain or discontent are the stew pots of creating the most amazing nourishment we'll ever experience. Like when we experience a profound loss. And in that experience, we gain insight to how we were living our lives and how we want to live. So change happens. In that season of pain, we can discover a new set of priorities. Now, we live by the truth principle that God is absolute love, omnipresent, omnipowerful, and available to us, through us, and as us at all times. But sometimes in those moments of pain, we choose to forget it or not to experience it. Have you ever wondered how God experiences a season of war or grief or lack? God doesn't. God doesn't even know these experiences exist. You see, the seasons, these temporary things that we go through, are a human experience. And they're born of flesh and blood. And they're invested in a dualistic world. In the Christ consciousness, we can only know good and very good. And you might even ask, but what about the crucifixion? Wasn't that a season of pain? As a human experience, it was pretty horrid for Jesus the man. But for Jesus, the Son of God, it was an opportunity to experience the fullness of the Christ consciousness. So these seasons, which we deem physically unpleasant, painful, and full of suffering, are really opportunities to expand our awareness, expand our consciousness, and grow in our powers. Another truth principle that we live by is that we are created in the likeness of God, the very likeness of God. And we have an unlimited capacity to heal, create, expand our consciousness, and grow if we choose to. So in our seasons that appear fallow or anxious or sad, we have the capacity to move beyond that. We have the capacity to become snowbirds. You know what a snowbird is? We all know what a snowbird is. A snowbird is a bird that lives in the temperate north climates and then flies south to the temperate warm climates in the winter. So it splits its season into two locations. And some people change their geographical locations depending on the season as well. You know what I like about snowbirds? Their instinct to choose what is best for them. There's great wisdom in that. In Unity, we can create snowbird consciousness. We can allow our consciousness to stay consistent and continue to elevate to places of great peace and love. We don't have to go from season to season. We don't have to experience great lows because we know ultimately we are the master of our thoughts. Now, I'll tell you, as a human being, we do experience that. So as I share this with you, this is our goal. Our goal is to be in that higher plane. In another truth principle, we know that thoughts that are held in mind and feelings that are felt that we hold on to manifest in their likeness. What we think manifests in experiences. So, once we are experiencing anger, grief, and depression, as our words pronounce any limitation, so shall we manifest. Likewise, when we dwell in our pain or our pain dominates our being, sometimes we even fool ourselves into thinking, if I just didn't have this pain, my life would be good. But that's a delusion. It may appear good for a while, but at its root is a propensity to feel pain. So that's why we turn to our toolkits. You know, the toolkits that we often talk about: affirmative prayer, affirmations, denials, meditation, practicing compassion, practicing forgiveness. We have the ability to manipulate our manifestations differently. And Jesus taught us that our minds are so powerful that through his expanded consciousness, he was able to perform what was perceived to be miracles. But we know that when we go to that place of power in our mind that we are transformed inwardly and it goes outwardly. And we have the potential for that power too. We have the power to place our focus on God's goodness, gratitude, forgiveness, wholeness, joy, abundance, abiding peace. All of it is available to us right here and right now. So I want to be clear that seasons of grief, sadness, and pain are normal in our human experience. They're normal. We're all going to experience them. And we have the ability to use our minds in a way that we experience a minimal amount of unpleasantness, or even transcend the feelings of pain altogether. Now, in this past week, or actually past weeks, I get the pleasure of hearing your stories. People have shared stories with me of how their lives have been transformed, how miracles have happened, how answered prayer has come their way in the most unexpected ways. I'm going to call Kathy Cronin forward, and she's going to share a story with you about a prayer, a vision that she has had in her life and how it unexpectedly appeared.
Thank you, Robert. So Robert asked me about this because I shared with him in August when Felicia Searcy was here. I attended her workshop, and it was about Dream Big, Dream Bold. And we shared with a partner our 3-year vision of where we thought we would be 3 years from August of 2017 to August of 2020. And at that point in time, I had a vision that my home was going to become a prayer center. And little did I know that it was going to take a diagnosis of my husband having stage 4 cancer for that to manifest so quickly and so soon. So we have started a prayer center in our home on the Friday evenings from 7 to 8. We also have asked people to lift him up into prayer. Miracles have been happening. We've gotten some really great results and things with this, but we still continue to do that, and we're still keeping our home to be a prayer center for those who have their own prayers and their own needs to be answered. We do this we're going to do it on the first and third Fridays of the month, and it's basically a time for people to come together and pray. We focus on the healing, whatever you have in your life that needs healing. We focus on Peter's healing, and we ask that everyone can join us as they want. We will get information as where we're at, but this was a vision I had, and God brought something to us, a challenge to manifest this in our life. And the other vision I shared at that point in time in the 3 years was that Peter and I won the lottery, so we still keep buying our tickets, and that we were going on a world cruise. So I've got the vision that he's going to be around in 3 years to enjoy this time with me. So, thank you.
Amen. We do too. I'm going to ask my sister Veronica to come forward and allow her to share part of her testimony.
Hello. In Buddhism and Hinduism in India, there is a word called Maya, M-A-Y-A. And to you scholars out there, it means illusion. In more simple English words, it means ever changing. So when you see this beautiful flower at 4 a.m. in the morning, it is beautiful. It is perfect. It is God's creation. However, when you come to see this same flower at 11 o'clock tonight, it may not be as perfect. It may not be as beautiful, and certainly it probably has lost its perfume. This is how our lives are, ever-changing, as Pastor Robert beautifully stated. I feel there isn't much more to add to this, but just a little story of Lynn's and my own experience of this ever-changing world that we live in terms of health, relationships, prosperity. It's forever changing. Nothing is static. In 1986, Lynn and I bought our dream home in Del Mar. A 4-bedroom house, Lynn's gourmet kitchen with a view forever. I had a perfect yoga meditation room, a room to do my workshops in and for healing, and a beautiful guest suite for guests to visit from Australia, England, Europe, and wherever in the world. I thought I was going to live and die in that house. It was the perfect house. Not to mention, for you guys out there, a 3-car garage. Well, anyway, we were there almost 10 years, and all of a sudden, Lynn has this great idea. We're moving up to Pacific Grove, Carmel, and Central Coast. I just about died. Was my world ever going to change? But this child standing in front of you was not mature at that time. She was like a 6-year-old just kicking up her heels and saying, no way I'm going. I'm not going. You go, I'll stay here. But that was not God's plan. And to make this story short, this child had to be moved out of what she thought was her perfect home, the blessed house, in order to find the world her home. I no longer slept on a beautiful bed in a beautiful room with a magnificent view that you could see forever. I was now going to learn to be humbled by sleeping on newspaper in India, on stone-cold floors in Egypt, eating off banana leaves. I didn't even need plates at this point. I didn't even need silverware, forks or spoons. I ate with my right hand because that was the custom in India. In Japan, I slept on tatami mats. In England, if I was lucky, I had a rug to sleep on, perhaps with a blanket on top. But boy, now, standing in front of you, am I ever grateful that I can just go live in an apartment for 2 months, perhaps in a mobile home, if I'm lucky, for 2 or 3 months. But faith has grown, deepened, and strengthened. And now, whatever the Lord wills for us, we gracefully and so happily accept, because God has instilled gratitude. And with that, you can get through anything and still become. You no longer have to hold this beautiful flower, but you become it. You become this beautiful flower in God's flower garden.
Amen, sister. Amen. And for those of you who know part of Veronica and Lynn's story, they have lived around the world doing mission work. And they have, it's a far road from, what was it, Del Mar? Yes. A far road from Del Mar. And we are so grateful that they're here with us right now as they prepare to go back to India to serve once again. So, dear ones, every one of us has a season. And we're going to have our seasons of ups and our seasons of downs. And to know that when God is our source, that our seasons of down can be raised up. And that in our seasons of being up, that we continuously remind ourselves to be grateful, both for the good seasons and the not so pleasant seasons, to hold gratitude in our hearts. And that is my wish and hope for all of us this season, that we hold gratitude above all else in our hearts. Will you join me in prayer? We thank you, loving God, for always being with us, that your presence is with us at all times. We thank you, dear God, for your love that dwells within, that we are always reminded, and that we are gently reminded of your presence. And if gently reminding doesn't help, we are forcefully reminded that you are there, you are guiding us, you are loving us. We claim this in your holy name. Amen.